There are a lot of people in the UK whose image of Christianity is dominated by what they hear about the religious right in the USA. It's Christians, they say, who reject belief in biological evolution and think that the world is 8,000 years old and don't want children to be exposed to views that challenge that position. No wonder Professor Dawkins has a bee in his bonnet. It's Christians who are obsessed with abortion. It's Christians who want to ban books from schools that might expose children to certain ideas about sexuality or gender identity or the history of slavery. It's Christians who are leading the campaign against marriage equality. If Christians get involved in politics, we're going to be marching back in time. That's what happens when Christians get involved in politics. And yes, it's not just the religious right in the USA who subscribe to these views. There are Christians in the UK who agree with some or all of these things, even if they do not have any comparable influence on British politics. But it's also worth remembering one irrefutable fact about Christians. I'm not aware of so much as one decade within all of the 21 Christian centuries when all Christians agreed about issues of fundamental importance. The World Council of Churches estimates that there are today in excess of 30,000 different Christian denominations. In other words, the history of Christianity is one long story of disagreement and conflict between Christians. Oddly enough, those who mistakenly condemn Christians for all agreeing with the religious right in the USA can sometimes, in the next breath, blame us for fomenting conflict, Protestant against Catholic, Catholic against Orthodox, etc. When we Christians are accused of fomenting conflict, the person who's bringing that charge against us is acknowledging that Christianity isn't a monolithic phenomenon. We're not all the same, and that there is a very large array of areas in which Christians are self-evidently deeply divided among themselves. And that includes all of the issues on the current agenda of the religious right in the USA. What is more, this is something that surfaces in my day job. For some time now, I've had the privilege of teaching Christian ethical theory to school children and university students, and one of the first things I try to impress on them is that there is almost certainly no such thing as an ethical topic on which all Christians agree, and that includes the topic of political Christianity. There are many Christians who would strongly disagree with my claim that Christians should be politically engaged. And it's not just Christians who believe this, of course. Some of the most powerful arguments for Christian political quietism have come from those who are deeply hostile to Christianity. The idea that my Christian commitment is ultimately a purely private affair, that my religion belongs only in the privacy of my own home, is espoused by militant secularists, among others. Indeed, this is the very definition of some versions of secularism. However, the idea that dissident opinions should be excluded from public debate, except for those that promote hatred or violence, should suggest that at the very least, such a position is incipiently anti-democratic. I believe that Christians should work hard to make our society a better place. And you can't do that without being political, and therefore willing to engage in public debate and action. And because I believe in democracy, I also believe that we Christians must be willing to face the challenge that our beliefs and actions may come from other Christians who disagree with the positions that those in my tradition take, and from those who aren't Christians. So where does this leave us? I can only really give two hints to non-Christians who are wary of Christians getting involved in politics. The first is to beware of thinking that the religious right in the USA is the real version of Christianity. Numerically speaking, in global terms, they represent a minority of people identified as Christians, although they most certainly have access to considerable resources and very powerful outlets in the world media, especially in countries that speak English as a first language. But leaving aside the head count, the theological roots of the religious right are firmly planted in a combination of movements within Protestant Christianity that emerged in the 18th and 19th centuries. There are powerful arguments to suggest that key features of their worldview could be described as reinventions of Christianity. And if they can be described as reinventions of Christianity, this immediately calls into question their claim to be the real version that has existed since the first century, 2,000 years ago. But even if those arguments are meaningless to non-Christian spectators of our unseemly squabbles, it's an empirically verifiable fact that lots of people who call themselves Christian and who profoundly disagree with the core tenets of the religious right are just as convinced that they represent the real version of Christianity. In other words, condemning Christian involvement in politics on the basis that the real version of Christianity is toxic begs the question of what is the real version of Christianity when there are so many expressions of the religion that claim the title and that they all disagree with each other. I would argue that from a non-Christian perspective, there is no such thing as the real or true version of Christianity. There are only versions of Christianity. Having said that, of course, I believe that I belong to the real version of Christianity. My point is that there are lots of other Christians who disagree with me. My second hint is this. When you see Christians appealing to their religious beliefs to support their political position, ask yourself, is this somebody who is a Christian who happens to be a conservative or a socialist or a liberal or a nationalist? Or are they a conservative or a socialist or a liberal or a nationalist who happens to be a Christian? In other words, in what ways do they ignore or explain away things in the Bible or the official teachings of their denomination that undermine their political position? Or, to put it another way, to what extent is their political position an expression of their religion, or their religious affiliation an expression of their politics? Do they cherry-pick the teachings of their religion that support their political position? And in saying this, I'm not pointing the finger at just one side of the political spectrum within Christianity. I suspect that this is a feature of all expressions of Christianity that engage in political action. My two hints that there is no reliable way for a non-Christian to identify the true version of Christianity, and to watch out for those who tailor their Christianity to fit their politics, doesn't settle the issue, but they might at least alert you to some of what is going on. Above all, it should put a question mark over the claim that Christians shouldn't be involved in politics. After all, which are the real Christians? Because we come in such a huge variety of flavours.